Hello and welcome to our second episode about pumping. Today I'll get more specific, which was really challenging because every obstacle on the tracks you ride is different in the way. There are no standardized angles or transition sizes or anything like that, which I really love. It just made it difficult to come up with a good way to structure this video. But after some back and forth, I decided to cover 3 obstacle categories in more detail. So first up are starting ramps, then we'll have a look at bigger uphill obstacles like step-ups or jumps, and then lastly I'll talk about smaller waves for a bit. So 3 categories, each comes with its own challenges. Let's have a closer look. Alright, let's begin at the start. Since none of the starting ramps look 100% alike, their height, shape, and the way you drop into them will always be a little different. But most of them share some similarities, like that they're pretty steep, you generally hit them at low speeds, and your trajectory aligns quite nicely with the shape of the track. And what the combination of these 3 factors gives you is a very soft landing, which is absolutely key here because it makes it easier to stay balanced when you land in a fully tucked position. And that's what you need to go for on those kinds of starting ramps, because that way you've spent less time moving horizontally and more time accelerating downhill. And the second advantage is that it puts you in a perfect position to pump because your center of mass is so close to the ramp, giving you a lot of room to pump out of it. And this just goes to show you again how important bending and extending is. Alright, let's now move away from starting ramps and towards our next category, uphill pumps, also known as step-ups or big jumps. Usually we hit those sections fast and the transitions are relatively small. So on obstacles like that, the biggest challenge is this compression that you have to overcome. And that's tough because a lot of force hits you in an instant. If you go into it passively and you're just reacting once the compression hits you, chances are it's already too late to adjust your balance because the forces got so high so quickly, and you'll find yourself flying through the air just waiting for impact. To avoid that, you have to do something that's extremely difficult, partly because it's just difficult to do in general, but also because it's very hard to recreate the speeds and compressions in practice. Now, the correct way to ride this is that you have to actively shift your weight back with the right timing to be able to counter the compression that's pushing you down. And you can only push against it if you're balanced out. And only once you learned how to control and play around with your center of mass like that, you'll be able to stay balanced throughout the whole transition and counter the compression at every spot. But please don't go on the track next year and hit the first step up you find without a speed check and just lean back in the ramp, because I said that's the way to do it. It's a really fine line you have to walk there. And to me, it's a lot like driving a stick car for the first time. It's tough to get that feeling for the clutch and the gas at the same time. And if you don't have the perfect ratio dialed down, you're not gonna win any drag races soon. Same thing in ice cross, where you need to know where to shift your weight and when to do it. Even if you're off just a little bit, you won't be able to put much power into the ground. But now enough with the tall stuff, let's move on to small stuff. We've reached our third and final category, the pumping of waves. Now, this is all about making the most out of short transitions, or sometimes lose the least through the short transitions, because on many past tracks it was more important to go into a wave set with the most speed possible and avoid crashing, rather than accelerating through pumping. So I'm gonna call this type of obstacle survival waves for now. On wave sets like that, it's best to just jump over the whole thing, to be honest. But if that doesn't work because they are too long, it's important to focus on the first downhill part of the wave set. This is where you want to feel heavy and push down. If you're able to do that, you can make yourself light over the next uphill here. Now, if you fail to put down pressure early, you'll enter a vicious cycle because you'll take a bigger impact in the middle, giving you no time to absorb the uphill part, which is going to shoot you up, making it impossible to push down into the next downhill. So really make sure you hit that first part right. Now, this is yet another topic where there's a lot more to talk about, and I'll definitely revisit it in the future. But for now, we'll leave it at that and have a look at the second type of waves I want to cover, which are waves that are actually pumpable. There weren't too many of them in my first few seasons, but it seems like the track design changed towards easier waves over the last 2 years. Now they are a little higher and much longer than they used to be, which gives you a lot of room to use good pumping technique and put force down into the ice like I always talk about. Here's a beautiful example of Marco in Japan. He pre-jumps into it and fully pumps the first one, even with a little bit of arm swing, which is really hard to do on waves because there is so little time. And I love this clip because it's so visible here, the power he's putting down in that short transition and how it shoots him forward over the next wave. Just very nice technique. And here I have one more example for you. This is from the round of 64 in St. Paul a few years back. You can see I'm in third place here coming into the straightaway, and I pumped the 2 waves as hard as I can, and just look at the speed difference that made. That's not skating or gliding, it's simply being able to put a lot of power down at the right spot in a short amount of time. And I'm showing this because this wave set was very easy for everyone, especially compared to the year before. But that's why you maybe need to re-evaluate the way you practice. Just because riding something in the skate park or pump track or wherever is easy doesn't mean that you can't do it better. Whenever you find a nice transition or even a bad one, try to put as much force into it as you possibly can. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's that important. And then of course, try to stay on your feet over the next obstacle. Always good advice. Alright, that's it on the topic of pumping, at least for a while now on this channel. I'll be back next week to talk about scrubbing, which is gonna be pretty interesting. So stay tuned to learn how to stay low.